working because we're streaming everything live. So, huh? Yeah. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the final panel, the last stretch of this amazing two-day conference that we've had with some incredible artist talks, a bunch of workshops, really insightful panel discussions. We're here in the last hour, last 45 minutes of the Touch Designer sessions in India with the Node Institute. Of course, thank you, Stefan, for putting all of this together. Thank you to the Swordfish team. And I think it's really nice that actually this idea of this panel came from Stefan, which gives us great, I really like that, where he decided that the last panel should be one that happens one independently with nothing else running in parallel so that everyone can join in. And of course, the last one so that we can put into context everything that we talked about and experienced over the last 2 days. And that brings me to this kind of the topic that we're talking about today, which is all about the future of the immersive ecosystem and event venues in India. And I'm really glad to have three amazing panelists with me. I have to my left Chaitanya, I have Tejas and Vincent. I'm not going to say too many words because I would like to give you guys the opportunity to introduce yourselves first, of course, and then maybe we can get into conversation.
Hi, I'm Chaitanya. I'm from Video Waves, which is a large format LED rental company in Mumbai. We essentially do corporate events, and my work mainly, lived on large format LED screen installations for, God knows how many events. And at that time, it just struck me that what if the screen could do more than play visuals, right? Which is what got me into Touch Designer. And I started figuring out, okay, you know what? I can make screens move. I can make screens react to, whatever it is that I'm doing. And now I focus on turning what started as experiments, like they were very, very raw and rudimentary experiments, into deployable installations. And yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to being a part of this panel.
Hi, my name is Tejas. I also go by the moniker Strike. I'm an artist, a producer. I also run a festival and a transmedia label, which is a strange one to be doing in India. But yeah, my work is sort of primarily stemming from music and then working with various forms of media alongside music to either deliver an experience or an installation or in some cases a project for a brand. And I'm also fortunate to know many of you sitting in the crowd because you've all been a part of some of the work that I've done, or we've networked through IMIT Festival or in other ways. So kudos to everyone here who put this together, the Node Institute and Swordfish, and thank you for having me.
My name is Vincent Samuel. I've been producing concerts for the last 30 years, music concerts. It's probably 800 or 900 concerts in India itself, large scale, small scale. And primarily right now I'm in the spree of building venues. One of those prototypes is what we built in India called Terraform Arena. That's a venue that we designed and curated. And we have another 5 more coming up in India. That's in short something about myself, and I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. So I'm really glad we have these diverse kind of backgrounds, and it's going to give us different perspectives, I think, on this ecosystem. From the hardware solutions to the venues to production to also being a performer yourself. So actually, that's where I would like to start, because I think that's the entry point, the fundamental point of when we all get into it. Maybe there's an aspiration to be a performer or be part of a performance. Maybe you're not the performer yourself. So maybe Tejas, like to begin with, I think it would be nice to understand, like, how did your journey in? I don't think you started with the idea of I'm going to build a festival or I'm going to play at these big festivals like Lollapalooza, which wasn't even in India till very recently. So I would really like to understand what is it the first mindset that someone has entering this ecosystem as a performer or as someone with some ambition to perform?
I think in my personal experience, I think, like I said, for me, it started with music. I was very fascinated by the idea of presenting music in a live setting. I feel like there is an experience layer to that just is very rarely recreated in any other way, shape or form, right? Like our largest medium of consuming media and entertainment right now is the internet, but it's just not the same. And I've also created things on the internet, and I can speak from experience that what you leave your audience with in a real environment is just special. It's hard to describe it. While I started as a musician, I was always fascinated by visual arts. I'm not trained in any visual arts myself. It was mostly experiments in trying to be able to, let's say, elevate the musical experience in a live setting. So a lot of those early experiments wasn't me working with the visuals, it was more collaborating with people. I was fortunate enough to have a lot of friends who worked with graphic design, animation, visuals, touch designer, even filmmakers, for example, and just playing with those mediums to understand how things could come into a live setting. On the professional side, I had worked with visual mediums like film, television, OTT, long form, short form, because I run a studio in Bombay where we produced a lot of audio content for these platforms. But the curiosity was always, how do you bring that to a live setting? Now, when I started off DJing, once I moved back to India, I realized a lot of the nightlife experience of going out to listen to music, at least when I started off and I came back around, I want to set context, maybe 2015, it was a very exciting time for the music scene, but the experience layer was almost always passive, because the venues that you would go to listen to music were starkly different to, let's say, how one would experience live music in a different environment. We didn't have the wealth of venues that we're now seeing coming up that are plug and play, that are capable of delivering this incredible experience. It was largely, and for those of you who are not from India, it was largely, and still largely to a big extent, is pubs, restaurants, sort of disguised as a live performance venue, right? So let's assume if you have a performance where you require absolute darkness, it's very unlikely that you will actually get it. And there are operational reasons, obviously everyone runs a business, but so I think working in those spaces more and more, I realized that if you have a unique problem, you need unique solutions. You need to find unique ways to be able to present visual art along with your music. How do you create an experience that is translatable, you know? Because one place you might have a great PA system, a giant LED wall, in another place you only have a projector in a small room with 60 people. But as an artist, you're still creating with a vision in mind, and you're constantly adapting to all of these different circumstances you find yourself in. So I think it's an exciting time in general, and we'll obviously unpack more of that, but I personally think in India what we've seen is that unique circumstance of not having the ideal scenario to do audiovisual or immersive work has meant that we have extremely talented engineers, technicians, visual artists, musicians that are constantly thinking out of the box to be able to deliver that experience the way they imagined. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're looking for answers here. I think we're looking for conversation. And I think you directly, I think, have started the path to something else, because I feel like the fundamental thing in what you were saying is the idea of space, right? Like the venues and what kind of space was available. And this immediately brings me, I have follow-ups which relevant to both Vincent and Chaitanya. So I'll start with Vincent here, which is, for 30 years you've been in the ecosystem, you've seen venues come and go. You've seen, for example, I mean, right off the top of my head, when I was young, the Palace Grounds was the iconic live event venue. We've had so many iconic bands and performances come, which unfortunately got taken away from us. We had venues like the Humming Tree and things like this, which blew up, disappeared, and now is back again. So having seen this wave in venues, what do you think has happened? Like, is there been a shift in how not just people are seeing the venues, but policymakers, people in the industry, etc. And how do we create more of these spaces for people like Tejas and me to get inspired to do things again?
So there is a difference in time when I started producing events in 1996 and in 2026. There's a lot of difference. In 1996 to almost 2000, 2002, people didn't know about concerts. You know, it used to be campus, college, fests, all of that. That's the concerts they used to say about. But over time, people and promoters and clients became aware of what a customer needed, okay? And even over time, customers traveled around the world to experience concerts. So what happened is that over time, people expected better experiences in concerts. So promoters in those days, you know, obviously India didn't have any venues. And even if you had the venues, they were built for sports. And because it's for sports, it's not built acoustically. So you could never play inside a sporting arena. So what happened was in our days, we call ourselves the pathfinders. We used to find venues, open lands, and create bare lands and give experiences to people. Used to build toilets from scratch. We used to build green rooms from scratch, but used to never get the quality that you would have it somewhere else in the world. So what happens over time, promoters understood that, and right now over the last 5-6 years, most of the promoters have had the urge to build venues. Now to build venues, you need land, and land is not easily available. Either it needs to be supported by the government, or it needs to be supported by a private entity who has the vision to do these kind of concerts and entertainment. So that is why there was a difficulty in having lands. Now, for example, the venue that we built, we made a deal with the landowner for 8 years or 9 years, and then we were able to build the venue. Because the owner had that vision, we did that. But now our focus is customer experience, because customers now in India know actually what to expect from a concert. It's simple. You go to a mall, you know what to expect in a mall. You go to certain other places, you know exactly what you expect. Right now, customers know what they need at concerts. And that's why it's very important that we build venues that are not barren land and have facilities for a lot of people. I mean, I've had a lot of women come and tell me, hey man, we can't even go to the washroom. But if you go to the venue now that we have built, I think women spend more time there than actually coming to see the concert. So there's a difference between facilities that we provide and the facilities that we want to build. So that's why it's important that India needs to see more venues and give that experience across the customers that come to the venue.
Yeah, I think you said something quite interesting, which is more people have had access to travel outside, experience more, and that is, they've come back with more expectation. I think off late, having been born in the internet generation, or at least an adopter of the internet, I think that's also been a big catalyst to this. Like, people now have access to social media, you're seeing things that happen across the globe, and now even not being able to travel, you have this expectation, right? Or you want this desire to experience something. And often having worked in this experience, for example, I'll tell you one of my, I once got approached by a client who wanted to design an anamorphic LED screen for advertising, etc., right? Never seen an anamorphic screen in real life, but it was something that blew up on the internet, on social media not so long ago. So I feel like this has become a part of that experience, and now people are designing spaces for the internet also as part of that. And of course, as part of that conversation, equipment, and that's where visuals is boomed, lights is boomed. The need for all of these kinetic pieces has come into the forefront. And Chaitanya, I'm wondering, as someone who's been in that hardware situation and been providing these solutions for people, how has that changed? Have you felt the need to upgrade? Have you felt like that's come from the client's end, or have you been trying to push that yourselves? How's that changed over the last few years?
So I think, as you rightly said, over the last few years, with Instagram blowing up and everyone getting access to, the best access to the videos of the best of technologies from everywhere, as a hardware-first company, it's been sort of a forced innovation where we've had to step out of our comfort zone. Where for an event of, let's say, a particular scale, we know that it's about 1,000 or 2,000 square feet of LED screens that we need. Now, in order to win that bid, we also need to offer clients, okay, this is a new centerpiece that I have. It can probably be a kinetic screen that moves in and out. It can probably be a transparent film screen that directly sticks on glass. Or it can be like a DNA screen that rotates and can be the centerpiece of your pre-function area. So and after a point of time, once you've looked inside, this is where I can innovate, and you look at all these places, it sort of becomes second nature, where you're always thinking that, okay, I have this piece of hardware, what else can I do with it? And I think that is the part that excites me the most, where you take the most random piece of hardware. It can be a normal LED screen or whatever you call it. But how do you get people to interact with it is where I feel like the industry is going now, because you have abundant examples online of the cool things that people are doing. And I think it's only a matter of time where in India, as a hardware company and studios, once they come together, I think it's going to open up a whole new avenue in terms of hardware requirements for clients.
I wanted to add something here. See, we deal with artist riders for many years. And artists have specific riders that we need to produce in India. I must tell you, among so many concerts that we have produced, maybe 10 concerts, we've had the artists bring in their stuff to India, because they're a touring company, may it be the Coldplays or the U2s or Rolling Stones. They're a touring design, so they bring in. But most of the artists have their riders. And I must tell you that India is at par with the world. They are absolutely in par with the world in equipment, in softwares. It's just that there's a lot of time and energy that is required to train people to create some things, That creativity, they have the mindset, but they don't have an avenue and a space to learn. There's a lot of training that needs to happen in India. I think people are very smart. Whenever they are given an opportunity, we have the hardware, we have the software, but sometimes they don't have the space for mentorship and workshops and all of that. So such kind of things that happen will lead for better avenues for those people to create. But in terms of equipment, software, we are at par with the world. I can very confidently say that.
If I could just add, and I completely agree with Vincent, because I've seen it firsthand at festivals like Lollapalooza, where before that festival, a lot of the other festivals I've played over the last 10 years, you've seen that progressively sort of bump up. But I think in the last 5 years, specifically after COVID, it's just rocket ship to the moon, right? Like, it is at par with any global production you will find. And it's very capable people, very committed to putting on the best thing they can put on. I just want to add one layer, slightly deviating from the technicalities of it from a cultural standpoint, right? India has always been a country which has a huge wealth and history of creating incredible spectacles forever, hundreds of years, if not thousands. We're also a culture of people that love to gather, right? Across sports or religion or different kinds of moments, weddings, all sorts of these things. And because we're talking about the dilemma of what does the future of immersive interactive look like, I think there is a nuance that some of us as creators often forget, that people come for experiences that they can connect with, or the hope is that they will come for an experience and then connect with it. There is a language to the design of immersive media that is spoken in various parts of the world. I personally think we're about to step into the era where India figures out what does immersive mean in India, or the global south. What is the language of an immersive LED quadraphonic sound art experience feel like in a Bangalore, in a Chennai, in a Cochin, in a Maharashtra, or wherever else. Because like Vincent said, we have the talent, we have the hardware, we have the software. Most of the people in this room are a part of that ecosystem. But I think somewhere the struggle also lies in terms of figuring out how do you take this to an audience at scale. Doing it for 200 people in a room in 2 cities is not going to let you take that experience to the next level. So I think we're just about tapping into that space where you're seeing artists that are in the mainstream now looking at immersive and like, incredible audiovisual concepts and going, okay, I can now bring this to my audience because the stages are there for it, the tech is there for it, the talent is there for it. So yeah, I think it's that balance of, some of us need to experiment in our little niches, but then also figure out how do you take this to bigger places. Like some of the most incredible audiovisual things I've seen in India have been at religious processions, temples, that is the reality of it, or weddings even. Because you're trying to create something that absolutely blows people's minds. And I think, at least in the independent scene, right, myself included, for the longest time, there was this feeling of like, oh yeah, but that's not cool. Because it's not like, it doesn't have that aesthetic, or it doesn't have, that's not true. Like, when people come in for an experience, and their minds are blown, or they're completely taken away by what they've seen, it doesn't matter whether it is this aesthetic or that. Whoever created that experience has just delivered that feeling. And I think there's a hunger now among audiences for more of that. They want to see it, experience it. They want to be in unique places like this one, for example. Like, I never knew we had a glass factory in Bangalore that could be an immersive arts festival. Like, it's cool to see that happen, Yeah. So, yeah.
Just adding on to these amazing points, I'd like to give an example that, almost everyone here will resonate with. It's about the MediaPipe plugin. It's an absolutely wonderful plugin, and we've seen the community do some wonderful things with it when it comes to hand tracking, gesture tracking, face tracking, and all of that. And it's all over Instagram, and we all love to see it. But I think for a lot of people, this is where the journey stops. But it shouldn't be the case, because this same data that drives your visuals on a laptop screen can easily be used to track a speaker on a stage that is 100 feet wide, or do something in immersive environments where we're always thinking big. So the bottleneck that I see here is access to hardware, that most people is access to hardware, because only when people have access to real world hardware, real world scale, because a lot of the problems that you will face on a laptop are completely different when you try them out on a 50-foot LED wall, where your LiDAR sensor will start doing something funny, or you'll have latency issues, and you'll have to tackle with a lot of that. So if we figure out a way to solve access to real-world hardware, I think it's going to open up a lot of the creative intent, and it's really going to empower the people to come up with bold ideas that they can execute at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to dial back for 1 second to something that, Tejas, you mentioned, the cultural nuances of being in India. And I think, so as someone who also left the country mid-practice to go study abroad and work abroad in this field, I was always met with this, like, so every time I'd used any color, to give you context, I moved to Berlin. And the second I used any color in any of the work that I did, people were like, oh, why do you use so much color, right? And I was like, man, I lived and breathed color. So there's this cultural aspect that people didn't understand. And like you said, was considered not cool. Now I think that I kind of want to touch on this topic of when we're stepping into the event space, when we're stepping into venues being designed, when we're stepping into the hardware that we're using, when we're stepping into the experiences that we're creating, are we entering this kind of world of, I'm sorry to say, but like a digital colonization as to what is good and bad, what is acceptable, not acceptable, what is cool and uncool? Like for example, Vincent, is it necessary that a space needs to look like this, the backstage needs to look like this, have this because, I don't know, maybe Evian water, because that's what an international artist wants. From a hardware perspective, is it necessary that the cables have to run this way and this color or whatever it may be? I I don't know, but I'm just wondering because I face this kind of a challenge a lot. As a curator, as an artist who's practicing myself, I'm always asked to kind of replicate something that's been done, and oftentimes somewhere in the West, right? So I'm just, from all three of you, I want to understand your perspective on how do we kind of put our stamp and our cultural identity in this space?
So the thing about the world and the thing about India is that India is very diverse, very, very diverse. If you study, if you travel every 8 hours, you have a different clothing, different food, and different culture. Every 8 hours, travel. You will see different types of people, different languages, everything. So building a venue is not easy across India. You need to understand the geography of that place. You need to understand what happens in that land. Bangalore, rock capital of India. You go to Hyderabad, there's a lot of marriages. You go to Bombay, it's a mixed culture. So you got to build venues which has the ability to cater to all of them. It should be a multi-purpose venue. I'm not naming the venue, but there's a venue coming up in Bangalore. They're building a dome, okay? It's going to be multi-purpose. It's going to have concerts. It's going to have Disney on Ice. It's going to have Cirque du Soleil. It's going to have weddings. It's going to have everything. So it's a multi-purpose venue. So what happens is when you want to build a venue or a space, you need to understand what that city needs or what that space needs. And that is very important when you build a venue. In Bangalore, you can easily build a concert venue because you'll at least run 24 events in a year, whatever the case may be. The other thing about diversification of in India live events is that you have events through the year. You have a concert time, you have a wedding time, you have corporate event times, you have a religious times, political times. So events are continuous, and there's no dearth or there's no shortage of events. But how do you cater to them? You may not cater to everybody, but you need to understand what that city needs and then build the purposes. The detailing of how you want to build it, obviously you need experts for it, but then it's important to understand what that city or what that space needs and then build the venue accordingly.
I just want to respond to what you said about, this almost, I don't remember the exact term, but this layer of colonialization that exists in those of us who've grown up in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s in India, right? Because the reference point, you're very right, not just from the outside, from the inside has also been, you see something outside first and you're like, oh, that's cool. How about we try and do that here? And it's very real. I think myself included, a lot of us have come from the colonial hangover of what is cool outside of India first. But I think that's changing, especially with younger generations now, and some of us who've done this long enough to understand that, you got to wear it on your sleeve. I didn't grow up in Berlin. I grew up in Bombay. And for me, the cacophony of traffic was an everyday thing. So, maybe silence is not the aesthetic that I come from. But maybe that also means that my take on silence is going to be very different. So I think one is being brave to bring that forward and to create, because inevitably it will create a unique experience, right? Because your perspective is unique. Also, echoing what Vincent said, I think just quickly jumping over to someone who runs a festival or a business around all of this, none of this is cheap, right? This is not, it's not a situation where an artist comes up one day and be like, I want 40 feet of LED and it needs to be hanging from the ceiling and everything's moving, and somebody stands up and goes, yes sir, no problem, let's do that. It needs to warrant all of that being supported through labor, through licenses. There is a business model, people need to get paid. It also needs to be viable to continue doing it. We've seen many examples also of things in this country that have happened, one big shot, boom, and never happened again. So I think this perspective of building in a carefully thought out, sustainable, planned manner, understanding that you're not only always going to do music festivals, you're not only always going to do corporate events. It is a mix of all of those things. Even patronage, right? If you just follow the trace of where all the money comes for creative work in India, it all comes from brands. The framework for public funding exists, but it's a very small slice that goes to many different things. So as soon as you're in electronic arts or digital experiences, for everyone from the artist to the hardware teams to the venues to everybody, the promoters, the ticketing vendors, everybody's money comes eventually from some kind of a outreach exercise or a visibility exercise or a branding sort of concept, right? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Obviously, we wish that there were other formats as well and not just one, but that's unfortunately the case right now. But when that happens, you need to start figuring out very quickly that there has to be a way in which this thing can continue to happen. You know, with the fantastic venue that Vincent and his team have set up, if they went, no, we're only going to do music festivals here, we don't want to do anything else because that's what we made the space for, I'm sure it would be very hard on the P&L. It would not make sense at all. Like, so, but then also being capable of doing many things, I think is what we're seeing with even music venues coming back, like the Humming Tree, or Antisocial in Bombay, or G5A, or all of these different spaces that maybe at a smaller level than an arena size venue are realizing that they have to be multi-purpose. They also have to be open to doing different things. Right. So can the same space be used for a immersive theater performance? But on some nights, it's also going to be used by a stand-up comedian who has a stool and a mic stand. And that's okay, because there is an audience for that as well. And that helps sometimes sustain the, let's say, slightly experimental thing we might do as IMIT Festival, right? It creates space for those things. And I think we're now at a place where, for example, people like Chaitanya, Vincent, they're also understanding this at a very different layer than the creators, right? They understand the challenges that sometimes people building the experience may not see. So having those conversations and figuring out, okay, what is the real sustainable way of doing this? Are we sometimes being unreasonable with our asks? You know, is there maybe a better way to do things? Maybe there's better hardware that some of us have never heard of. So I think that layer of the ecosystem is now finally revealing itself. Because I think some of us also know this, that for the longest time it was all very siloed, right? There is the artist who sends a tech rider, promoter forwards it to the venue, venue gives it to the technical vendor figures it out, goes back to the venue, comes back to the promoter, da, da, da. Now, you can't put on shows like that anymore. When it's a very well thought out production, everyone has to sit at the table and have real honest conversations about how are we going to pull this off? And what are the challenges? What do we need to be careful of? So that everyone gets a win out of it, right? No one goes into any of this thinking, I'm going to do a half decent job. Everyone wants to make a great experience because they can then do it better the next time and so on. So yeah, I think that layer of the ecosystem is invaluable. Like artists speaking to the technical teams knowing who what the venue is trying to achieve and so on, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a very interesting take. And Chaitanya, I feel like there's something here that I know we were talking earlier and you said that you're setting up kind of a laboratory and experience center where now exactly what Tejas is saying can happen, where now an artist can sit on the table with the technical team and say, oh, this is what I want to achieve, but even before we get to a production, say the technical team can come back and say, oh, maybe this is not what's possible, the budget, whatever it may be. And this is what maybe you're creating with your experience center and lab in Mumbai. And I know some of the creators have already been invited there and will be invited there as well. So do you want to share some more insight into why you thought that was important and how you see this kind of playing out?
So what the thinking behind this was that the only reason why I got as far in my touch designer journey as I have is because I always had access to the hardware that I needed. I think this is very important if you constantly want to keep tinkering, reiterating, and getting better at the craft. Having access to how you want your output to pan out in the real world is quite important, like I said, when it comes to your artistic intent, your creative intent, and just the technological confidence with which you can walk into a show. So with this reasoning in mind, it simply started as a place for me, okay, I'll just take my laptop in, because we work a lot with mechanized screens that move in and out, and we've made them interactive. And to do that, you need constant access to hardware. And after having multiple conversations with creators, what we essentially understood is that there is a clear lack of a space like this in all I can talk about is Mumbai. So in Mumbai, where as an artist, you can just come in. If you're a technological studio, you can just come in, plug in your hardware, plug in your laptop, and we have the sensors, and we'll have everything that you need set up over there, and we can keep iterating on the output that you want. I think the effect that this will have on the community is that everybody will have a holistic understanding of what the other person is trying to do. So as a creator, you'll know where essentially the hardware bottlenecks lie, why this is not going to be possible, how this is going to work when your lighting changes, for example, because that is a problem that I'm sure a lot of creators and studios face. And from a hardware perspective, like Tejas rightly said, hardware has always been siloed, where after everything is decided, we're just sent a tech rider that, okay, we need this media server, just arrange all of it. The media server should have this particular graphic card, and that has never been an open conversation. But I think a space where creators and technology providers, if they can come in together, and this is exactly what we're trying to do. We are going to open it up as we go along slowly over the next few months. And we're really excited to see the results that it has, because in my honest opinion, the touch designer work, or all of the immersive work that I've seen is, it doesn't need more ideas, it doesn't need more creativity, but what most of it needs is a much bigger surface to land on. And I think once we make that possible, I think India is going to step into a whole new world when it comes to immersive media.
I like that you mentioned confidence, because I think that again neatly ties into this, what we were talking about earlier about what's cool, uncool. You move with a different confidence when you know what you're doing, when you know that the work you've put out has been received well once, twice, 3 times. You're confident when you've made mistakes. You've had the opportunity to make mistakes. And I think there's so many steps that we've taken in the past. Like I, for one, have made most of my biggest mistakes on the job because of a lack of places to learn and experiment and build. I'm sure Vincent as well, 30 years of experience in the world has not been all sunshine and rainbows. And I'm sure now you can speak with a lot of confidence. I know you've also done work outside the country, and that gives you a different confidence. Tejas, you've been doing so many amazing things, and now I feel like there's a different conversation with you of confidence, which is you have been building platforms and giving opportunities to bring other people into your workflow, and developing confidence there. So I keep repeating this word confidence, but what I mean is experience, opportunity, mistakes, and this is across the board, right? You make mistakes if you're a creator, you make mistakes if you're in production, you make mistakes if you're dealing with hardware, it doesn't matter. And I kind of want to talk about this and understand your perspectives about making mistakes and how that's seen and how that's taken. How do you take how do you take it on your chin and move forward?
Since you talk about confidence, I want to tell you a fun story. Vincent and I followed each other on Instagram a few months back, and I need to tell you this also because I've never mentioned this. Vincent's the bio line on Instagram, it had this word event guarantor. And that was the first time I'd heard that term, right? Even after working in events for many years, I'd never heard that term before. And it suddenly just clicked in my mind, because for anyone over here who's worked in the events business, it's like this snowball of a million things flying around, rolling down at 600 miles per hour. Everything's happening all at once, right? It requires that confidence that you speak of, whether it's a LED screen-based setup or a giant stage, or even in a small space for 200 people, if you're doing a multi-wall or a dome setup. There are so many moving parts that confidence will only come from the fact that everyone kind of has a grasp on things. And that comes with layers of communication, access, having experts in the room, having people who have the high school nerves when shit is not working. Just before we started the panel, I was telling Vincent, it reminded me when I saw him right now about how his team pulled off an absolute miracle just before my show at Lollapalooza. And trust me, in that moment, even after having been on stage so many times, you're not keeping cool. you're stressing. Like there are people on there, it's the biggest show you've ever done. Everyone's asking questions. You don't have answers. You're asking questions. Gear is not working. Something's on mute. You can't figure out what's on mute. At that point, you need people around you that have put in the 10,000 hours, have had those conversations, have tested everything till it's like, you know it inside out. Like, so even having a lab space, for example, that opportunity is very new and it's very special. Internationally, when I've seen friends of ours or even other shows that we're inspired by or have learned from, they take a stage production and they have at least a couple of days, if not more, in a staged setup in an empty warehouse with maybe a scaled down version of what will eventually go out in the world, but there is some kind of a staging exercise where you can play through all those scenarios. What happens if you lose redundancy? What happens if your audio drops out? What happens if your video stops working? What happens if touch designer decides it's in a bad mood? Whatever, any of those things, right? This is the byproduct of working with technology. So having access like that and having expertise to be able to pull that off, I think for the community is very important and will only create more confidence to be like, let me go do that thing that I haven't seen on the internet yet. You know, referring back to what we've seen outside and we're like, oh, I could do something like that. Let's try and recreate that in a Bangalore or a Bombay or a wherever. If you have that confidence, you'll go beyond that. You'll go beyond, okay, this is what a stage is supposed to look like, maybe not. You know, maybe let's change the perception of what a stage is supposed to look like. Yeah, just wanted to add that in.
So I think mistakes are inevitable. You know. Yeah, mistakes are inevitable. I'll quickly tell you. Failures are sometimes inevitable. What made me get away from a lot of mistakes is more time on planning. And when you plan more, you have to ask this question, what if, what if, what if? You keep asking what if. You know, if you keep asking that question in your planning, you will derive and you will plan more not to make mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable, but unforeseen things are sometimes, you know, you can't even expect it. But the more you plan, the more mistakes you avoid. And as you go along, you know, you will also find mentors who mentor you and who will be able to correct you along the way, and you should be able to learn more and more. But I think that, you know, it's important that in events you take more time to plan, and that avoids a lot of mistakes that is there on ground in reality. You know.
With confidence and adding to what Sir said, one of the things that in my capacity I've learned is that you're confident, but it also teaches you how to be humble and not take anything for granted. Because I'd like to give a small anecdote about something that we went through, and after that, you know, even with a rigorous amount of planning is always a non-negotiable. But at an event, we'd installed a particular kinetic screen of ours one night before the exhibition. Something happens, everything's working amazingly well in testing. Suddenly there's a power surge and a power reversal. The screens stop working. We open them up. We see all of the PCBs inside are fried. What do? 6 hours before showtime. So I think it also gives you, you know, the space and the ability to be humble in such situations, because at that time you realize there's not much you can do even with an incredible amount of planning that you've done. And I think it gives you the confidence to walk into your next event, as, you know, a well-rounded technical or a creative persona, because you've been through what is probably unimaginable. And, you know, if you can face that and, you know, wake up the next day, I think anything's possible, you know.
Amazing. Yeah, I know we're short of time, but I have to end on a different note. India today in the world cannot be ignored anymore. We've said multiple times we're there, where we provide state-of-the-art infrastructure, venues, we have the ecosystem, we have the talent. We have these festivals, Lollapalooza, we have these brand engagements, Rolling Loud, everything is happening. But is the future of India creating more IPs like this, like the Sixth Sense, like the properties that you're building, like the festivals that you're building? very shortly, is that the future? Is that what we can expect as the next outcome of this? And how do we contribute to that? How do each one of us contribute to building things that are, let's say, make in India, you know, for
If I could take a stab at that, I feel like right now what we're seeing is a lot of giant venues being announced. Arenas are being announced, small stadiums, different kinds of multi-purpose venues are being announced. If you ask why, it's because there is clearly a case for it, right? There is an audience that wants it. There are artists that need that kind of a space. So now that need is being addressed. But if the idea is to create more original work does not start at large stages. Original work evolves and eventually ends up at a large stage. I feel like for the idea of creating new ideas, new work, new mediums, we desperately need right now in India that small to mid-sized layer of spaces that can create the opportunity for someone to try something out, right? Because you can't go try something out at like a 4,000, 5,000 capacity venue. Very hard. Or you have to be someone who's already in those spaces and now you're slowly adding new layers of things to experiment with it. But for those of us in the room that are trying to build projects that are not necessarily meant for large concert stages, there isn't an ecosystem or an infrastructure of venues that is capable of providing that. Can there be? Absolutely. And there are a few dotted across the country. But if we're looking to create more original work and also encourage people to make new things, then there needs to be an environment for new things to be created. And I think, like Vincent said, there is a movement towards it. I think accelerating that is not just the job of people who create the spaces, it is also the people who go for these things, right? To support them, who are willing to buy a ticket, not just because you know who's performing that night or what experience it is, but also for something new. Yeah, because it takes time, effort, cost. There are so many things that go into making these things, even at a small scale. So yeah, my hope is that we will see more of that, and thereby a new crop of things that can find their way to the large arcade-like venues.
There's no time, so I'll quickly tell you that suddenly over the last 2-3 years, big companies have found good spending power in India and the need to have events. India is right now in the global map for every single artist. I am working up to 2028, so I know who is coming here. So there are festivals that you would be so happy to hear, which has amazing immersive experiences and LED screen visuals, because I produce EDC Las Vegas in Las Vegas. I take over one of the stages. So there's amazing amount of creativity that is coming to India. Great, because there's amazing customer potential. There are promoters ready to pay for the artist. They have the confidence and the backing to do it. And therefore, many companies, whether it's AEG, Live Nation, OEG, everybody, you know, they are absolutely investing time and artists and even their resources to build venues in India. So I think the next few years, we have a great boom in India in many IPs that are coming. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. It's a very positive and hopeful note to end on. Did you have something to add, Tejas?
I did, but I don't want to go away from the positive and hopeful, but I will say, I think while it's exciting that promoters are willing to go these distances to bring these things to India, I would treat this as a call to those promoters to also look inwards,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like
Of
we're
course.
also in a situation where international artists get paid boatloads of money to put on these things, but that doesn't really trickle down. You know what I mean? That ecosystem is only an ecosystem if there is infrastructure across the board. So hopefully, I think the industry that sees this as an opportunity realizes that opportunity is only going to be sustainable if we start developing things from the ground up and not just, you know, bring in completed ideas and put them on as a showcase. So yeah, that would be my only hope. Yeah.
Amazing. I think, yeah. So, I mean, as you can probably tell, we can go on and on about this. I think about 45 minutes is not enough. But also, I think words only get you so far. And at this point, I think it'd be nice that we all go and experience actually some of the outcome of some of the things that we've been talking about. So, yeah, of course. So first of all, thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your voices and your thoughts. Thank you all for being here. That's the end of our Touch Designer sessions in India. 2 wonderful days for the conference, but a whole week with some wonderful people. Before I hand the mic to Stefan, who of course wants to say some things, I know, I really want to thank, of course, the whole team from the Sixth Sense and Swordfish for allowing this to happen, putting in the money, the effort, the hours to bring everyone here. Of course, massive thank you to Derivative, to support, but also more importantly, the Node Institute. Thank you, Stefan. To the team in Berlin, David, Lynn, for supporting from there. And Stefan, would you like to say some words to end the evening?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I feel like I have to have the last word, but also maybe this is a very interesting discussion. And yeah, I feel the urge to give you a couple of feedbacks as an outsider, right? Especially about the topic of, you said there needs to be a lot of training. I mean, that's partly why we came in. And that was resonated very much with what you said, no? And you, this decolonizing. Because that's what Kunal and I discussed a lot. Okay, it can't be in the way that we bring us Westerners in and we tell the Indians how to do it. This is wrong. This has happened much too often. And what we really tried also to learn and understand from here. And I mean, maybe what put us in the position to say a few things is that some developments just started earlier. One thing that's really important, and I say that to the people with money and production power, no, innovation doesn't come from the big places. You're completely right. The reason why I can stand here being invited to talk dipshit here to you is because we started with nothing. We started with something we wanted to do and there was no money to be made. We could do that because we came from a place of privilege and from a place of ruins. Privilege is students, parents paid for a living. Ruin, GDR, lots of these places, nobody wanted them. So we went in and started something and there was no model for that. That's how rave music started, that's how visuals started, that's how all this shit came about. So the true innovation, when you want to find the Indian soul in the new media art thing, it's by starting small. It's by giving space for innovation. If you run a venue, and a lot of the things that we can do in Berlin, because people have made these values, and I tell you what, you're going to become very dependent of these creatives, because you're going to have these huge hungry surfaces. And always bringing in the Rolling Stones is going to be very, very expensive. So you will need the local people to fill these surfaces. And if you're wise, you give them that chance. If you have 5 paying days a week, make 1 day a week where you bring in the folks and just let them experience this. And this is what we realize in Berlin. They have lots of these venues, and all of them are happy when we say, should we come do an event with you? We have no money, we will not pay you anything. And they're like, yes, bring the people, because the people are the key. The creatives are the key. And the creatives in India, if they take that chance, and if you realize in the end you have the power, right? You have the stuff that the people want to sell. So I think that's why it needs to start small. There will be innovation, and this innovation will not come from outside. This will come from here. And I think we've seen it in the music industry, right? There is a lot of stuff coming from the global south that was an injection of life for that industry, which is just about marketing and money. And they were so thankful for have MIA, bringing other heritage. In Berlin, we have a lot of Arab influence. You know, this is not the most respected people where everybody looks at. They're coming from the ground, but they're bringing the new stuff, right? They're bringing the exciting stuff that nobody has heard before. And it's so cool to see these things merge and create novelty. And I can only encourage everybody in India here, everything I've seen from you is amazing. Right? You have to have that confidence that Kunal was talking about, and you have to start just to take your space, put your foot on the ground, and not wait for the brands to give you the money. If you do cool stuff, the brands will stand in line and will really want to give you that money, because they need innovation, but they're completely unable to create it. And that is maybe my encouraging words as the outsider. I see so much potential here. I see so much that we don't have anymore, so much, spaces like that, which you can take over, and they don't have to be glossy. They have to do something authentic and new, and that comes from people spending time that doesn't have to earn the dollar immediately. That's where innovation comes from, and that's what I really want to hammer home. Part of a generation that kind of created a new genre just because we had that freedom. We didn't need to earn the dollar. We didn't need to earn the dollar. We had access to space, and the universities gave us access to technology. And these three things, you can create something that then everybody else will look at because it's original, it's new, it's inspiring. And that's hopefully maybe the spark that we can bring in here. And once you have done all that, and you still want to invite us, then we're going to be really happy.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're not going to keep you here any longer. I hope that you guys, please feel free to catch these gentlemen, pick their brains one-on-one, and more importantly, meet each other and the whole festival team. See you around the festival, guys. Have fun.